Go ahead.
First, I think it's important to mention that the settlement's never been a problem for any peace process, and we withdrew from Sinai and we took our people from Gaza not so many years ago. And according to the room for everybody, my question, if you're going to take the homeless next to your house and give them your children's rooms and you're going to share beds back to back with one of the homelesses, as a personal example for room for everybody.
Okay. The first point that was made was that the settlements have never been a problem. But I think if you look at the documentary record, there is little doubt. In fact, I think it's fair to say there's no doubt whatsoever that there have been a major obstacle. So over the past 10 years, Israel has put forth a series of maps of what it's willing to leave and what it wants to keep in the West Bank. And all of the maps show, and it will come as no surprise to most people in the room, as most of you know, Israel is building a wall in the West Bank, which incorporates about the last estimate is 9.2% of the West Bank. And the wall has in effect become an annexationist wall. All the land to the west of the wall, Israel wants to annex. And one of the sore points has been Israel's refusal to withdraw to the June 1967 border. I don't think there's anybody in this room who even remotely, cursorily follows the conflict has any doubt that one of Israel's positions is that it will not return to the June 1967 border. So to say in the face of that the settlements have never been a problem, it seems to me is very difficult to reconcile with about a 30-year history of the settlements being a significant problem. Now, on the second question, which is, to my thinking, a perfectly fair question, but I don't think it accurately reflected what I tried to say. I said very clearly and candidly, no, I'm not ready to give up my room. But I also said the relevant standard for resolving the conflict is international law. The law does not require me to give up the room. It actually doesn't even require me to give up a winter coat. But I say, yeah, I'm willing to go that far. But the law does require of Israel to withdraw to the June 67 border, to dismantle the settlements, to allow for a just resolution of the refugee question. That's the law. And if you want other people to respect the law, then you have an obligation on your part to respect it as well. Now, on this particular question, and I would invite you to look at the record, there is simply no quarrel about what the law is. You can make the argument, okay, that's your interpretation of the law. But in fact, if you look at every forum, there's no dispute about what the law is. And so I don't see how a reasonable person trying to find a reasonable standard for ending the conflict can use any other available standard than what the law is. If you don't want that standard, if you reject it, then you would have to present to the people in this room, not just me, to the people in the room, present an alternative, reasonable standard for resolving the conflict. You don't accept the law. Fine. So what's the alternative standard? No, I'm asking. I'm asking. What's the alternative?
Elect a government that's not a terrorist organization?
I didn't ask that question. No, but we have to be fair. I answered your question. So now I'm asking you, if you don't accept the law as being the fair, reasonable, principled standard for resolving the conflict, can you put forth a different standard which would reach a broad public? What would it be?
It has to be an agreement between us.
Fine, we have to agree. On the basis of what? What's the standard? Agree on what? Yeah, but if two people disagree, then we have to find a standard against which we could decide who is on the right side and who is on the wrong side. We need a standard. So what's your standard? You don't want the law. So what do you want to replace it with? I'm curious. I can't think of one.
We don't have the problem with the law. The law is the law, but the question is if there is a suicide bomber in Tel Aviv, so then
Right, and there are laws. Okay, there are laws for that. If you ask me whether people who commit war crimes or crimes against humanity, whether they be Israeli or Palestinian, they should be prosecuted, of course I think the answer is yes. I think everybody guilty of committing crimes during the Gaza invasion should be prosecuted, beginning with the leadership of the Israeli government. We can agree that should be the law. We should use the standard of war crimes, crimes against humanity, whatever the current particularities are. So now we come to the Israel-Palestine conflict. What's your standard?
I think we're going to move on to our next question. He thoroughly answered this one over here, and we want to give a couple other people a chance to ask questions as well.
I would like to ask you a very simple yes or no question. Please, yes or no will suffice as an answer. In 2008, when Israel offered the Palestinian leadership 98% of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, would you or would you have not accepted that deal?
If it were the case... One second, folks. Allow me. I said everyone should have the right to speak, but nobody has the right to restrict how the other person lives. Let me answer your question. Your question began speculatively. It started with if. So let's start with the facts. What did Israel offer? In the last waning months of Mr. Omar's prime ministership in Israel, when he was already clear his days were numbered as prime minister because of the multiple scandals surrounding him, he called the head of the Palestinian leadership, Abu Abbas, in his office, and he made an offer. And the offer was, according to his map, it was 6.8% of the West Bank. According to the standard of the occupied territories, it was, of what's occupied territory, it was 8.7% of the West Bank, including all the settlement blocks. On the question of the settlement blocks, which I mentioned earlier, you keep the settlement blocks, there's no Palestinian state. He kept the settlement blocks, and then on the question of the refugees, he said, I won't accept the right of return, I won't accept the principle of Israel's responsibility. He said, I will accept, over a 5-year period, I will accept 5,000 refugees in total over a 5-year period under the principle of family reunification. That's simply not that's not a basis for trying to resolve the conflict. And so, unsurprisingly, the Palestinians, even if you can call it a serious offer, and just for those who are interested in the petty details, there never was an offer in print. What Mr. Omar did was he called Abu Abbas, the Palestinian president, into his office. He said he let him see the map, and then Abu Abbas walked out and then tried to reconstruct it with cartographers on the Palestinian side. So the seriousness of the offer is questionable. But even if it were serious, they're still keeping the same roughly 9% of the West Bank on the question of the refugees, 5,000 refugees under family reunification over 5 years with no acceptance whatsoever of historic responsibility. It's a non-starter for resolving the conflict. I don't think any honest person or serious person could put forth that as a fair offer. It simply is not. It's not fair.
Clarify, what's your answer? I didn't hear an answer.
I believe Professor Chomsky is a fair and serious person, so that's a yes answer. Next question.
Yeah. No, sir, this woman.
I hope you will find my questions fair and reasonable. First, I want to ask you, you asked who is a Jew, and I want to ask you who is a Palestinian. Second, I want to ask you what are the rights of the Israelis. And then I might accept your solution for 2 states, but you have to remember and talk about the fact that the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, was founded in 1964, 3 years before the occupation. And the mission of this organization was a liberation of Palestine, which means that there will be no Israel state. And Hezbollah, according to their spokesman, Hassan Hazadin, just said recently, after they go from Saba farm, we won't stop fighting them. Our goal is to liberate the 1948 borders of Palestine. The Jews who survived this war of liberation can go back to Germany or wherever they came from. So it might be a very justice solution, but unfortunately, the reality that we have to deal with is much more complex. And when you relate to the issue of the right of return, you actually give a solution of 2 states, but not the Palestinian state and the Jewish state, but the Palestinian state and the state of all its residents. And in this point, I want to ask you, what is my rights as a Jewish Israeli?
Well, the audience can decide for itself, because each of you is blessed with an independent quantity of gray matter, though because of God's throw of the dice, the quantity might be the same, but the quality might not be equal. But it's certainly sufficient, I think, of sufficient quantity and quality such that you could judge for yourself whether in the course of my remarks I did or did not say that Israel is a state and has the same rights and obligations as any other state in the world today, and that the United Nations and the International Court of Justice, they validated that. And I said, if you try to overreach that, then you're going to lose a large part of the broad public. So I thought I made clear that its rights are the ones that have been universally and uniformly validated.